Major funding for these programs is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank, New York Community Bank, Eastern Consolidated, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Meridian Capital Group, Terra CRG, the Wickoff Group, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, Chase Commercial Mortgage Lending, Ariel Property Advisors, Genova Burns. Additional support is made possible by AKA Hotels Corman Communities, AmTrust Title, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Connect One Bank, Colliers International NYC, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, Flushing Bank, Friedman, LLP, Hendler Real Estate Organization, Hersha Hospitality, HAP, Investment Developers, Hodges Ward Elliott, Inc., Investors Bank, iFunding, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, New Banks, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Paulsonelli, Rosewood Realty Services, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, The Continuum Company, the Knackle Group at Cushman and Wakefield, the Meringoff Family Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Water, parks. People love being near the water and the parks. So today I've assembled this group of real estate leaders to provide their insight on how important are water and parks to the New York City real estate market. My guests include Robert A. Levine, who is the chairman and CEO of RAL Development Services, LLC. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Andrew Solomon, who is the managing director of Madison Realty Capital. Sam Sidhu, who is the CEO of Megalith Capital Services. And last but never least, my friend Josh Muss, who is the chairman of Muss Development. When did you start building on properties that had water near it?
Well, I mean, we've always tried to locate properties where there is a view, and the best view is from water. I would say that our first really waterfront site was initiated about 40 or 50 years ago. In South Staten Island, we have 20 acres on the water. That's the good news. The bad news, we still haven't built it. A long story, sad story. But we've built many projects since then on the water, and happily successful because water is a very attractive amenity to would-be tenants.
Let's talk about One Brooklyn Bridge. Tell me how you got into the decision and why you felt, because was it before the time also? Because One Brooklyn Bridge, the neighborhood has changed over the last
Well, we were there
years.
before the park, and the park was a thought of the community for many years before that. However, I'll repeat what I said on previous shows with you, and that was that when we drove past that building on the BQE, it screamed to be a residential conversion to me, having done a number of conversions before that. And the location just enhanced the opportunity because the views were spectacular. The windows are exceptional. The size of the windows is exceptional, and I still think I think that view of the southern tip of Manhattan is probably the best view of Manhattan from anywhere in New York City.
How much money has been put into the park after you started? I mean,
Over
with the community and everything.
Over $300 million. I think it's about $360 million or something like that.
So what do we
I
have?
think it's,
So what do we have today at One Brooklyn Bridge Park? I mean,
Well-
one Brooklyn Bridge is yours, and let's talk about the future projects, what Toll Brothers did, and what do we see?
Well, we have-
what's going to happen over there, because there's a school and other things.
Right. Well, we have now completed projects include 1 John Street, which is at the northern tip of the park, which was added to the park's property. That was just completed and it's being occupied. Next, we have the Empire Stores, which is near completion as well, which is office and retail. And then we have the Pier 1 development, which is the Pier House and the One Hotel, which is being built and being occupied very shortly. Then there is there's actually a maintenance building and being constructed on the uplands of Pier 5. Then there's One Brooklyn Bridge Park, and then there are 2 development sites to the south of One Brooklyn Bridge Park that will eventually house a 28-story residential condominium and a 14-story rental building, which will have nearly 70% of the units affordable.
Now, you brought up office and retail, and that relates to Andrew before and today with regard to the property projects that you've been involved with.
Sure, yeah. In Sunset Park currently, we are capitalizing on the water views currently. We have Well Square, which is 500,000 square feet on the waterfront, and as well as 341 39th Street, which is another 200,000 square feet. Both have exceptional unobstructed water views, and we're utilizing the soon-to-come East River taxis that's going to be on the 58th Street side. That's really going to be a nice added amenity for the folks who are going to be coming over to Well Square at 53rd Street.
Now, what about your previous? Let's talk about
Sure.
Industry City and Chelsea Markets.
Sure. Chelsea Market, of course, was a project that we worked on that was certainly capitalizing off the success and the attractiveness of the High Line. Since the High Line came in 2009, the activity in Chelsea Market has increased substantially. The tourist traffic there is somewhere between 25 and 30,000 unique tourists per day at Chelsea Market, and that's above and beyond the 1 million square feet above the concourse that you see there today. So capitalizing off the High Line Park has really been huge for Chelsea Market. And then with Industry City as well, also comes back to the Sunset Park Marketplace, which is also waterfront as well. And I believe that there's some talks going on in terms of Industry City activating another ferry stop there as well.
So here's the question. Now you're in Dumbo and you're also developing on a park, and I'll relate. How much value do you think that enhanced the neighborhood for people to buy and to rent? Because you have 2 projects in Dumbo.
Right. In Dumbo, I'll give you a very specific answer, which is, we have a unit on 1 floor that is the exact same line, very similar size, within a couple of square feet, that the floor above clears the water view. It's the A line, and we're priced at a 30% premium for that, specifically, with that example. Generally, in some of our other projects, not just in Brooklyn, but also in Manhattan, I think Central Park is the biggest view amenity.
And which is the new project.
Which
that
is
you're
a
gonna be
new
building.
project in the Upper West Side on 66th Street. And, what we've seen from the comps, it's too early to think about how we're going to price the building because we're still in pre-development. But what we've seen in the comps is, the data has shown that, you generally have a 50% premium for a Central Park view versus a city or even a water view, which is interesting in New York City because in most other major cities, you actually have the opposite. Waterfront views are at a premium to park views. Specifically in New York, it's Central Park, and I think part of that is just supply and demand. In Manhattan, we're an island, there's a lot of water. Part of it is just transportation. Generally, water is east, west, south, which is not as close to transportation nodes in Midtown Manhattan. But you also have the highway system in Manhattan, which is important from an infrastructure perspective, but it creates a barrier both as a view impediment, but also as a sort of a foot traffic impediment to access not only, the waterfront and the parks as a view amenity, but also as a use amenity.
When you're a resident living in a building of a non-gated community, these people are now occupying where you are living.
Well-
certain people say, maybe it's too congested.
Well, there are now estimated to be about 126,000 people visiting Brooklyn Bridge Park every weekend. It's up to about that number. And, the northern end, certainly at Fulton Landing, has a greater amount of traffic and congestion than the southern end. And it's really the activities within the park and how they draw the people. So the piers, one pier has soccer fields, so there are, people drawn to that. Another pier, has basketball courts or whatever. But I think, remember, that you're talking about a 95-acre park or an 85-acre
No,
park.
I'm not
so
disagreeing.
it spreads out pretty much. But people are there, but it's also somewhat seasonal, which also has a real impact on that. And it's a community unto itself.
When you built the Oceano, you put gates around it. Was that a reason?
It's a gated community, but there's access to the public. They can walk through. But the property itself, there's a huge central location where there's a pool. And then you have about 900 apartments. Virtually each one of them had a view, either a spectacular view or a side view of the ocean. We were also able to negotiate with the city to place an entrance under the boardwalk, so we had direct access to the beach. We really did not anticipate when we started out how well it would succeed, because that was a period when there were no buildings being built in Brooklyn, period, no apartments. So that turned out to be a really
Do you
successful
think
project.
the reason, there are other buildings in Brighton Beach
Yes.
which have not done that well. Do you think it was attributed to the location on the beach, the larger access, because the community space? that they
I
had?
think I can say objectively that no other project was nearly as nice, and
No question.
the apartments were very well laid out, and they're spacious. And also, you're right next to the subway. It was a very unusual and an unparalleled
You never
location.
realized that you built a transit-oriented development.
And I knew it all. I certainly did know it at the time.
So what now? So you left Brighton, and
Yes.
now you can walk about another
It's a
mile and a half or two
Probably,
to Voorhees Avenue.
yes. It's probably not as much, but we're building together with Avalon Bay a property which was a very large site. It was originally supposed to be a shopping center. So as of right, we were able to build a property which will now be about 30 stories. Avalon is building a rental below, and we're building condos above. We've had a terrific relationship with them. The beautiful part about it is that our building starts at about the 20th through the 30th floor. And the nearest buildings, the highest that they are, about 6 floors. So there's a view not only of the world, but right directly to the ocean and to
To the bay.
To the bay, yes.
Right, so you have the bay, and then...
And the Manhattan skyline.
And you're right on the mass transit.
And you're right next to mass transit.
So another transit-oriented development.
It's a good idea.
How much of a premium, you brought up an interesting thing before on the premium. How much of a premium do you think this has with regard to retail? Okay, we mentioned the Empire stores. We're talking about, I'm doing a show later on in the month with Marvin Shine, where he took Liberty View, and he put in Micro Center, and Saks Fifth is opening up. So it's a unique type of retail. Even the Empire stores, when Shia had it, he had no idea what he was going to have over there. How do you see the effects of water with regard to the retail consumer, people coming to the neighborhood, for the properties that you're involved with and so on?
Maybe for a restaurant. I can't imagine what makes a difference for retail, though.
Well, we have about 80,000 square feet of retail in the base of One Brooklyn Bridge Park that we had a challenge with. We had, prior to Superstorm Sandy, we had a supermarket that was coming in that backed out subsequently. And it's been a challenge trying to explain to retailers that there is the magnitude of foot traffic and the access from Brooklyn Heights as well to it. But retailers are not, they're not jumping at these so-called, at the seasonality of locations that have seasonality to them. They want surety. And in New York City, there are so many opportunities with,
So
huge foot traffic.
in
or
the
traffic
same
volume.
vein, on a similar show that I'm going to be doing, I'm going to have the people from the Howard Hughes Company. And the South Street Seaport was never a success, but it is the 22nd largest site that people visit when they come around to in the world because of the seaport. But it didn't really do well. The whole question is the continuity in the mix.
I think you hit it when you say it's the mix. It really is how you tenant the property also. I mean, they're doing things now with the Howard Hughes Company, they're putting in the movie theater. There are other things that I think will enhance the property far more than the small mall stores that existed previously at South Street.
But Dumbo, let's look at Dumbo. I mean, you weren't there at the beginning. We remember Mr. Willentis and everything else. But Dumbo has changed. It's a different neighborhood. And the retail has changed, okay? It used to be smaller mom and pops. Now you have the national chains.
Yeah. I think Dumbo will continue to change. Initially there was a lot of the conversions of the old industrial and office buildings. But you're only seeing a big sort of increase to the housing stock in the last couple of years. There are only a couple thousand units or families living in Dumbo. And I think that with some of the projects that are being, initiated through the Watchtower sale, et cetera, I think you're going to see that number double over the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's really going to drive the next phase of the conversion of the retail in Dumbo. And I think Dumbo also has good proximity to downtown Brooklyn, Brooklyn Heights, as well as the BQE. So it can actually become a big box destination with some of the big sites that are eventually
There are two major things in downtown Brooklyn that should enhance the retail. One is the development of the Strand, the so-called connector down to Dumbo from central Brooklyn, downtown Brooklyn, and also the new office buildings that Kushner is developing. So you're going to have
You mean Dumbo Heights?
Dumbo Heights, good
That's
enough.
what they call it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And you're going to find hundreds of new workers and tourists just strolling down to the Dumbo.
I think that whole Brooklyn waterfront has everything. That's the point.
Yeah,
It really is. The park now being completed. Listen, at One Brooklyn Bridge Park, the units are reselling now, retrading at 3 times what we sold them for initially. We sold units before the park was completed. It was a dream still. But now it's truly unbelievable, and the demand is insatiable. I think it's a great place to live.
You're converting industrial space to office now. It's the newest inclination of the world. It's being done in Long Island City, it's being done in the Bronx, and it's being done in Brooklyn. Those are the 3 locations. Do you think that you can get a premium office rent because of a water view? I mean, because large windows like you were talking about at your property over there, windows, views, and
I do. I mean, I think that, large open floor plans contribute to the desirability of new tenants coming to these adaptive reuse projects in the Sunset Park Marketplace. I think that it presents open plates with flexible space for tenants who need to have that flexibility to expand as their company grows. And when we're seeing TAMI tenants come into the marketplace, they're, starting with some smaller spaces, but understanding that they have the idea to expand. And, with that and with the evolution of Brooklyn Bridge Park and, understanding that, a sense of place is kind of being established within Brooklyn Bridge Park and coming over into Sunset Park with Industry City and then even coming over to Whale, it's driving the tenants to want to be part of these new buildings that are coming to market. And of course, as you said, with all these residential units coming online, you're going to have a lot of the workforce living in Brooklyn. So their commute and, their conversations internally are going to be, are we going to have space in Brooklyn?
Let's go to you, Josh. You mentioned that you went to Staten Island. The families went there in 1961. Yeah. Right now, you have a 540-foot Ferris wheel going up.
Yep.
You have an outlet center adjacent to it.
Yeah.
You have an enclosed parking garage. You have Lighthouse Point from Petrarca.
Yep.
which is a combination of residential and some office, and they've also announced the hotel.
It really seems to be happening, maybe. And you forget something. We have a site a block away from the ferry which we could build 300 apartments on someday. It has never worked financially, but it certainly looks better now.
Do you think, okay, here's a question, and this is, I have to direct.
With, by the way, almost as nice a view as from Brooklyn Bridge Park.
Well, Staten Island has a good view.
It's a spectacular
But
view.
now-
And it sees Brooklyn also.
But now I'm going to address this more to the millenniums over here. How do you see, and the people that you grow up with, that you're dealing with, how do you see the perception of Staten Island, even though it has water, it has certain amenities? I don't think a young millennium says, I want to go to Staten Island to live. I don't think it's,
It also has the best commute in New York City if you live near the ferry.
Right.
and if you work downtown.
That's correct.
What do you think those millennials thought about Long Island City 10 years ago? You know,
That Long Island City had a transportation system that could take you, if you work downtown, it's wonderful, Staten Island. If you don't work downtown, it's one step of a commute. You go to Long Island City, there are 7 subway systems.
That's the good news.
That's the good news.
The bad news is still Long Island City.
It's the bad news. No, the bad news is not that it's
I'm sorry,
Long Island
guys.
City.
I think you're right.
I think the bad news is that it's very congested and it's concentrated where people are. Okay, the concentration is too much, and the subways are too much. I mean, I don't want to joke, but I remember people saying, growing up of our age, who wanted to be next to the subway because you would hear it every 10 minutes, so you knew what the subway was. Today, you're in Long Island City, the subway never stops, okay, wherever those buildings
screeches
are.
then.
And it screeches over there. So
Our site in Sheepshead Bay is right alongside this subway.
Right.
But I stood there for many times, and it just glides into the station. It's almost like on rubber wheels. Seriously. Beautiful.
But so what do you think of that, Staten Island?
I don't know that Staten Island is there yet for millennials. I don't know if I'm speaking.
No,
broad
I'm just asking. I think I have 2 guys in your mid-30s, okay, who have contemporaries over here, who have a discussion. You know, people want to go to Brooklyn. Some of them are going to Long Island City because of the convenience.
10 years ago, they didn't think they were going to Long Island City or Brooklyn either.
That's what I was saying.
I think that there is an enormous amount of potential in Staten Island yet. I just don't know that the mindset of folks who aren't in the real estate business really understand Staten Island just yet. I think that they might understand that there's wonderful restaurants there, and I've been to some incredible restaurants, but they're not aware of everything that is happening within Staten Island. I think over the years to come, as these 2 gentlemen so eloquently said,
that bridge is difficult. You get stuck on that bridge.
it's tough. It's a tough one.
I think in terms of, ranking of submarkets or boroughs that are going to convert first, it's Brooklyn, as we've seen, then Queens, and I still think Waterfront Jersey. At the end of the day, it has great views, very similar, even maybe better access with a combination of having the path plus ferries. And there still is, people still need to get comfortable with it. And you're seeing young families make the move to Jersey City and Hoboken, but the millennials haven't made the move yet. And
There are more millenniums going to Jersey City today. Hoboken has already...
Robust.
But that's all a function of cost. It's all a function of pricing. And I think that as Staten Island builds itself out and the pricing becomes more appealing and you get a couple of, look, I mean, we saw Williamsburg turn around. I mean, did we ever believe that Williamsburg could be Williamsburg?
Water views, McCarran Park.
but-
It relates to my point, okay? Water and parks.
And Williamsburg succeeded to a great extent because of the zoning changes. Staten Islanders are going to dig their heels into Kingdom Come to
And
try
not
to prevent it. However, I can really see St. George eventually blossoming.
Right.
But that's what I thought 40 years ago. So we'll see what happens.
What about, Sam is involved up in Westchester County. Do you see the water? I mean, because there are opportunities right now, like I think Joe Cotter is converting one of the former GM properties, and they're also converting the Reader's Digest property. So something near, Nyack and all the Hastings on the Hudson, those. You see those as opportunities that people will pay a higher price?
I think so eventually, but I think you'll see Queens and Jersey City before you see those, with the exception of the more transportation-oriented submarkets, especially southern Westchester, where, you can be in the city in 25, 30 minutes. And I think that people will focus more on transportation first, and then I think you'll have some of the other submarkets that'll have the waters.
We were challenged. We did a project in Portchester, a rental, that was quite an attractive project, and we saw the link to Metro North and everything, and it was not just not received well, because the problem becomes that the housing stock, or the people could buy homes, you have to start to look at the pricing of different things and the comparative values, and it was not successful in that respect. So, but everything changes with time. Now Portchester's hot. This was 9 years ago, I'd say. So that was, I guess that's it. Everything changes with time. That's what we can say.
Last question with regard
Which is
to
limited
that.
time.
I mean, there's a discussion right now, I think it's AECOM, who bought Tishman Construction,
Right, AECOM.
wants to believe that there's a conversion of Red Hook, which has been a lot of vacant space.
Your grandchildren might see that.
Well, it's a visionary approach. Let's call it that. It's a.
But Red Hook also has the water. There's no question that it has the water.
But limited mass transportation, and that's what I think is the hindrance for that. Although everybody's looking at this increased ferry service, and you go to other cities where ferry services are very effective, and I think that maybe the new ferry service will be.
The only question on the ferry service, and this is by somebody who has property on the ferry, Jeff Levine, saying, he has the property in Williamsburg. He said, it's cold in the winter in the ferry.
Well, I think, I've spoken to the new guys, Hornblower, that have taken it over, and I think some of the new boats they're working on and some of the other things. These guys are professionals coming out of San Francisco too, and I'm looking forward to it because
The idea is to lease and sell in the summer.
Okay, so in summation, thank you. It's always good to have the sage over here. So in summation, everybody believes that the water and a park has value, and everybody likes to be there. And I'd like to thank Mr. Robert Levine, Andrew Solomon, Sam Sidhu, and last but not least, Josh Muss. See you next week.